Welcome into your free agent off-season edition of Spits and Suds. Hey, everybody, I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, back with another episode and back with our NHL insider who has been very busy today. He's from Shap Shots. That is his Substack, which you should subscribe to, and I'll tell you why in a moment. EP Ringside. He has a terrific book out called We Win Here, also starred in a movie called The Late Game. D Magazine as well. Writes some articles for in Detroit as well. I mean, he's just so busy. He's our very own Sean Shapiro, and got to give credit to Robert Tiffin when the tweet went out about potential goaltender. Robert Tiffin takes and snapshots a picture of Sean Shapiro right next to the local cup that he just won. How are you, buddy?
I am I'm doing pretty well. I got a big cup of ice water right now, and just try to catch up from get caught up as best possible from the crazy day we saw today for July 1st. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's start with something that I wanted to thank Spits and Suds listeners. I know we thank you a lot, but the numbers continue to increase, and we had an outstanding June. And it's the #1 hockey podcast originally from Odyssey. So thank you. You guys deserve a huge stick tap. We continue to grow. The coolest part is that, yeah, I know it went into June, but we had the same numbers as a regular season month, and now we're in the off season. So you guys continue to listen and support us. We did 6 programs last week, and we'll continue to do programs, and that's based on you guys supporting us. So thank you very much. Massive stick tap. Okay, let's start over the weekend where the Stars traded the rights to Chris Tanev to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Sean on his Substack had a really interesting article today. Now, we know about the length. We know about the no movement clause. But Sean, you had an article about a tax situation that basically was more favorable to Toronto, which sounds interesting compared to Dallas, because we think of Dallas, no state income tax, there's going to be more salary. So dive into that, because I thought it was a really interesting article on your Substack.
yeah, this was fascinating to me. This was so Chris Tanev had his introductory Zoom with media members in Toronto today. And one of the things Tanev brought up himself was there was a bit of an exit. He would have had a bit of a quote unquote exit tax if he had left Canada. And I've never heard of anything like this before. And so after hearing Chris Tanev say that, I reached out to a good buddy of mine, Kyle Stitch, who is a sports tax. He's a sports tax expert and works with a company called AFP Analytics, where they specialize in working with teams and agents and media people to kind of help turn all the tax law into plain English as best possible for us. So Chris Tanev is a very unique player. He is a Canadian who has never played anywhere outside of Canada. He spent, before the trade to Dallas, he spent his career with Vancouver and Calgary, and his only ever visa to the United States before this year was a student visa to RIT for his 1 year of college hockey. Back during the 2009-10 season. Ironically enough, a year he led RIT to the Frozen Four. But that's actually, for quick backstory, that's why they had the visa issues getting Chris Tanev onto the plane sooner in the middle of the season. I know we've touched on that a little bit on this show before, but always good to have past history there. So Tanev has been taxed as a Canadian resident since he's been pro, since 2010. And because of that, and being a Canadian resident, he's only had to pay Canadian taxes. And if he was to leave Canada and sign with an American team, he would spend more than 100. He wouldn't spend 183 days in the calendar year in Canada. Essentially meaning he could no longer technically file as a resident. So he had 2 options then. And Gavin, stop me if I start to lose anyone at any point. I'm trying to go as best as possible.
I absolutely love this. This is a deep dive for Spits and Suds listeners that I'm sitting back, bud, and I am fascinated by this.
Yes. So Tanev for basically, if he had signed with an American team, there was one of two options for what Chris Tanev could have done. First one is he basically could have come to basically a treaty agreement with the Canadian government where he would still report his earnings and pay taxes in Canada on his money. So he would still be, it would be basically willingly being an expat Canadian, still paying the Canadian tax bill, effectively negating any advantage of playing like in a in a tax-free state like Texas. And if Tanev had hypothetically signed with a Carolina or a New York or something like that, he would have been having to pay Canadian taxes and the taxes from those states. So like signing with an American team would have been just massive tax bill. The other option to actually get the quote unquote tax-free benefit of signing with the Stars, Tanev would have had to essentially he would have to go from a resident to a non-resident of Canada. And as part of exiting Canada, what he would have to do is he would have to go through and value all of his assets. Every single house that Chris Tanev owns, every single stock that he's bought during his time in Canada, he'd have to value them all up, take their appreciation, and if he left Canada, he would have to pay the taxes on that. This would have been a tax bill likely in the millions, because it would have been, we're talking about assets and a portfolio for Tanev going back to 2000, going back now 15 years, right? So it would have been a massive tax bill. So one of the reasons, like when I reported over draft weekend that the Stars were priced out on Tanev, it wasn't just a hockey thing or the term like it was. It was also Chris Tanev didn't want to go to a spot where he was going to have to all of a sudden cut a check for multiples of millions of dollars to the Canadian government. So you look at the Tanev deal with Toronto, and all of a sudden that no move clause makes a ton of sense. He got the 6 years,
yep,
full no move.
Yep.
He does not have to worry about ever not being a Canadian resident. He's going to finish his career. Wherever he finishes his career, it's going to be Toronto, or if he ever does get moved, he'll have full control. Chris Tanev is never going to leave Canada. And it is amazing how tax law came into be, and a big thank you again to Kyle Stitch from AFP Analytics. If you ever want a really interesting site and how to look at how some things, go check them out. It's AFP Analytics, for explaining it to me like I'm a 5-year-old so I can try to somewhat explain it on this podcast. But man, it is something I wasn't expecting to write about today, and I'm happy I did because it's fascinating to me.
It is absolutely fascinating. The no movement, fascinating as well. 4.5 average per year over 6 years. Sean, tax aside,
yeah,
I just threw it out there today to Stars fans, and there weren't any that were up for a 6-year deal and a no movement class. So tax aside, I'm guessing Jim Nill and his supporting cast, that would have been a determining factor as well.
The Stars were willing to go to 4, is what I heard.
Okay,
that's the last thing I heard. Is the Stars were willing to go to 4 years. The Stars weren't going to go over 4, and Tanev wanted at least 5, and obviously Toronto was willing to give him 6. So that was the length of the deal that came into play, because for the Stars, part of the success for this team has been how Jim Nill has managed the cap windows and everything like that. And we'll talk about what the moves that happened today, and we can have different opinions on things, but when it comes to length of contracts, everything the Stars did today still, for the most part, fits with that overarching thing of how do we keep shifting cores of success without overly committing to a piece that could stop that. And that has been a big key for Dallas.
And I also tweeted out, Sean, and I try to take a step back, and from a player's perspective, massive stick tap to Tanev, came here, embraced, his teammates. Obviously, they embraced him. Outwardly said he enjoyed his time here. I don't think they get to the Western Conference Finals without him. He gets what he wants. He gets to play for his hometown team that he grew up watching. So, I mean, I was just happy for him. I hated it for the organization because that was their number one priority. But at the same time, when you take a step back and you look at the contract, you look at the tax implications, which you mentioned, which are a whole nother layer, and you have to take a step back and say, you know what? Thank you for what you did. And I also pointed out over the weekend, Sean, and I don't want to dive into this too much, but we also need to look back at that trade. Jim Nill easily could have given up a first round pick or maybe more to get Chris Tanev. That was a hot item. So when a player leaves after they're essentially a rental, I like to look back and I say, okay, it wasn't like you gave up a ton. Sure, you did give up some assets, but it wasn't like you were giving up some of your top prospects or top draft capital.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, it was the right trade at the right time for Dallas, and I know there's some people who saw like the return when they traded his rights to Toronto, and I kind of he was always a rental, and it was the did you want to re-sign him? Yes, but it doesn't make it doesn't hurt the. It was still a good deal. It doesn't the fact you didn't sign him doesn't hurt the trade. The trade was about the success you had getting to where you did, and they had it. And maybe you would have liked to win an additional 6 games, obviously, but you can't fault the Stars for the Tanev trade at all.
So then we move forward, and the Matt Duchene and Stars camp are awful quiet, and sometimes that can be very, very good news. And then it comes out after the draft, that Elliot Friedman hearing that Duchene and the Stars are talking, and let's talk about that as the first signing for the Dallas Stars. Matt Duchene returning on a 1-year, $3 million deal.
Yeah, that's a hometown discount and a half right there.
Yes,
Like
it
that
is.
that's a great deal. I'm surprised Matt Duchene signed it, but obviously he liked his time in Dallas, and part of it is he's still making 1.55 million per year for the next 4 years from the Nashville buyout. So if you think about it, Matt Duchene's making 4.5 million this year. He got a nice check today in the mail from the Predators for the buyout too. So um, it's a nice it's a show of confidence in the long term plan by Duchene, and I think he's a great fit. He's a really good fit for this team, and I thought he definitely probably could have got more money if he had gone to the open market, but it's a nice piece of work by the Stars, and the 1-year deal is even better. Like so that's yeah, that's a good deal for Dallas.
It's a really good deal, fit in. And I'm also excited from a Duchene perspective. Mentioned on this podcast that Matt Duchene went through 2 surgeries last offseason. Then he's bought out. So he moves from Nashville to Dallas, has to kind of hurry up, get his family here, just a lot of things. And I think that could have contributed to running down toward the end of the season. He said as much in that he said for this first 60 games, he was kind of a robot, and then it caught up to him. So interesting to see an off season. He can settle in here for another year. So I'm excited about that. So when the whole Tanev thing comes down, it's like, okay, let's look at the list. And we see Matt Roy out there. We see a lot of Brendan Dillon. I'm just throwing out names. There's Sean Walker out there. There's a lot of names. And then free agency starts. And boy, did these defensemen go fast and furious. And the Stars were not among them. Who were you hoping to get?
Before all the moves happened with the Stars?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, I never thought it was going to be a day where the Stars needed to go big game shopping, but I would have liked to, like, personally, I would have, Brandon Montour would have been a nice little piece of business for me. He's a guy who obviously went and had a great cup run and got paid probably a little bit more than he's probably worth from Seattle based off the cup run, but still a good piece, got that 7-year deal. I think Matt Roy would have been a good piece.
Yeah.
I think Sean Walker would have been a good piece. Those were kind of the guys I was kind of looking at from a Dallas perspective of kind of where, like, would have been good fits on defense. And forward market wise, like, there really wasn't much I was overly interested in for forwards. I liked the Steel re-signing even after not qualifying him. That was always in the works. I'm ready to see them pivot this young core to let Maverick Bork and Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stakehoven get a full year's run. Like I'm ready to see that on the forward side. So my bigger point of emphasis was how can they pivot on the defensive front after losing Tanev because he was plan A. How can you pivot plan B? And we saw how plan B came out, and we can have a discussion about that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first defenseman I want to talk about, right-handed shot, Matt Dumba, 2 years, $3.8 million per year. Of course, Stars fans know Matt Dumba for the Pavelski hit. At the same time, was with Minnesota and then went to Arizona. He was really good for a while in Minnesota, went to Arizona, was traded to Tampa for their playoffs, and signs a 2-year deal with the Stars. My only question, Sean, regarding Dumba is I'm interested to see how much is left in the tank.
He's not as old as people realize.
I know.
Like he's only like he turns 30 later this month. Like you think of Matt Dumba and you think like, oh man, he must be 35. Like he'll only be 30 this year. So I didn't mind the Dumba deal. The Dumba deal is I think he can be a second or third pairing defenseman, right-handed. He's got a decent shot. He's kind of his offensive game is not what it once was. Like I think at one point in his career he was a 50-point player. He's probably now closer to realistically probably a 20, 25-point player. Not even that. Like he's probably closer to a 20-point player from the blue line now, if we just call it what it is. But I didn't mind that one. Like that one I think is I thought the term was good on it. The 2 years was on it. Like Stars need some right-handed defensemen. I was good with the Dumba one.
Okay.
I think my issue becomes I'm not super sold on Dumba and signing Ilya Lyubushkin both to 2-year deals where you're sending essentially $7 million combined on those two. Basically, I know they're right-handed, but if you had told me that you were going to spend this on Lyubushkin and Dumba, I'd rather have Ryan Suter on the third pair. Just like that's the issue.
And that's
right?
what I was thinking.
Yeah, like that to me was the issue where it's like you made the buyout for Ryan Suter, and I'm fine with it. But when you do moves like that, you and I have talked about before, you have to ask about what's next. What are you opening space for? And I struggle when this is what you open space for because one or the other maybe I could be on board with, but I don't. It's so yeah, that was interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's continue with Dumba just for a second because when I said tank, left as far as in the gas tank, I didn't think it was a great year for Dumba last year. That said, it was kind of interesting because someone tweeted at me and said, man, when you kept mentioning Dumba to the Stars, I thought you were just doing it for hits. They didn't really think that like Matt Dumba would really come here. I do like his physicality. And when they first signed, I thought I will admit, I thought to myself, and I didn't know if they could pull it off cap wise, but I thought, wow, that's a very strong third pairing. But at the same time, I absolutely see your point after the day is done that it looks like, he will likely be a second one. The Lyubushkin thing is interesting, Sean. 2 years, $3.25 million, and not great defensively. This is, the analytics I'm reading, and please correct me. Not great defensively, not great offensively. I don't see the fascination.
Bit more physical. He's a guy who passes a little bit more of the eye test for some traditional hockey minds. But yeah, I don't. The Lyubushkin signing to me is an odd one. Like, I don't get it. I don't get the. I think they kind of wanted him to build up a little bit of the physicality on the back end because that's what he's believed to bring. But other than to me, I can't really. I'm not defending this one. I'm trying to give people a little bit of an idea of
Yeah.
what the Stars might have seen, but I don't personally. It's not a signing that I would co-sign, right? So, I do like. I know I've spoken to people from Stars before. There are times where they talk about players who. There are some players who, analytically speaking, it's hard to actually evaluate them properly, and I think they would probably say Lyubushkin is one of those players where his impact can't be measured as well with the analytics space. And so that's got to be where this one comes from, just to try to get an idea of where it might have been in people's minds.
The third signing that the Stars made as far as defensively was Brendan Smith, who played with New Jersey last year, and it's a 1-year, $1 million contract.
In this contract, I have zero. No matter if you sign 15 people, I have no problem with this deal. This is a it's a look at Brendan Smith as a seventh defender, six/seventh defenser, making $1 million. On top of that, Smith has also played forward in his career too. Like, to me, this is Brendan Smith is going to be is a player who you need 7 to 8 defensemen every year because of injuries, and that's why Brendan Smith is going to play 45 to 50 games because of that. But this to me was a good depth signing, and if Liam Bixel comes in and somehow wins a roster spot, he can happily be. He's not making it where you have another prospect sitting as the depth guy. So I have no issue at all with the Smith signing. This one was fine.
Yeah, good penalty killer, just under 700 games, lot of NHL experience. I agree. Very good depth signing, especially for $1 million. Now, another defenseman was signed on Sunday. We thought the Nils Lundquist era was over, as the Stars did not do a qualifying offer for Nils Lundquist. But the Stars signed Nils Lundquist to a 1-year deal, just over $1 million. I wanted to play for you, Sean, because I have a question to follow this up. This is Jim Nill on Nils Lundquist after the draft on Saturday.
I think Nils is going to be fine. Nils, we forget he's only 23 years old. And you look at his regular season, he had a great regular season, had a strong regular season. In the playoffs, they pulled back a little bit, and that's just when you start to look at the teams we played against. It's a tough situation sometimes for younger defensemen. So I think Nils is going to come in here and take off and be a big part of our team moving forward.
So first question, Sean, let's clarify. When Nils Lundquist signs with the Stars, is it still just a one-way straight contract?
Yeah, so I was actually the person who asked the question to Jim Nill on. Congratulations!
On Friday. Nice.
Yeah, that was on Friday. That was on Friday, actually. From that piece of audio is from Friday night. But Jim, so let's real quick to kind of give people an idea of how this all works. I know a lot of people thought that Nils Lundquist era was done when he wasn't qualified. I even told people that the Stars wanted to re-sign him. One of the reasons they didn't qualify him as an RFA is because qualify someone as an RFA, there's some other cap implications and things like that come into play. So it was easier to not qualify him and then maybe work something else out as a UFA. So I actually didn't think the Lundquist era in Dallas was over until I saw them sign Smith, Lyubushkin, and Dumba today. If you had told me they re-signed Nils Lundquist, I wouldn't be surprised. But if you told me they re-signed Nils Lundquist after signing Smith, Lyubushkin, and Dumba, I am now surprised. The other big surprise to me on all of this is I don't understand why Nils Lundquist wanted to re-sign in Dallas.
Yeah,
that's the part that's the part that confuses me. From a Stars perspective, he basically had the freedom to go sign anywhere, could have done any, and you pick your team and you pick your spot, and I will tell people there's a disconnect. And then it's not bad to have disconnects. It's okay for different people and organizations to have different views on people. I think that's very important to know, because I'm going to say this and I want people to understand that. Jim Nill is a bigger believer in what Nils Lundquist will be than Pete DeBoer is. And so Jim Nill, it makes sense for Jim Nill to bring Nils Lundquist back. But if I'm Nils Lundquist and I see what's happened with my usage under Pete DeBoer, I don't understand the decision by the player. That's the thing that I don't understand. Um, Maybe he must love it. He clearly loves it in Dallas to want to come back, and maybe he thinks it'll be something different. But this is a guy who, come playoff time, was completely passed up by Alex Petrovic and was passed up by Liam Bichsel. And if you're Nils Lundquist, both those guys are back in Dallas.
Right.
So why won't it happen again? So full credit to Dallas, I guess, on keeping the asset. I don't know, but like, this is, to me, it doesn't make any sense from the player perspective why he signed this deal.
Basically, that means Petrovic's going to start in Texas, right?
Probably. I mean, that's the most realistic thing. Petrovic signed the 2-year, two-way deal. He'll go through waivers early in the season when everyone clears. But so that's essentially what it means for Petrovic. But I still don't get it for I don't get the reasoning for Lundquist for the player on this one.
Yeah, it is certainly a question mark with me as well, because I personally just wanted to move on. Whether he's successful with another team or not, it just wasn't happening in Dallas. So to continue it is fascinating. Okay, Scott Wedgwood signs with Nashville and the Stars.
Let me bring up one more defensive thing before we move on from defense, because this might be one of the most important things out of today. These deals, and with the Stars moves today, they effectively structured themselves where Thomas Harley will be signing a bridge deal. Unless another move happens to open up some other cap space, the Stars are not going to be able to afford the long-term deal with Thomas Harley now. Harley is probably, my friends over at AFP Analytics, who we talked about them at the top of the show, they specialize in valuations for players. Like, they have Thomas Harley. If Thomas Harley was to sign a long-term deal right now, they have Harley valued at a 7-year deal at $7 million per season.
Oof.
Is what would be a fair deal for Thomas Harley right now on a long-term deal. Stars ain't affording that right now. So they have Thomas Harley on a bridge deal at $4 million per fair value for Thomas Harley. And be clear, they specialize in fair value. It's not an exact science, because teams all look at defensemen differently. But their fair value looks for Thomas Harley on a bridge on a 2-year deal would be a $4 million per at 2 years. I think, Gavin, it's not a coincidence that the Stars have about $4 million in cap space right now without Thomas Harley signed, and Lyubushkin, Dumba, both 2-year deals. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think those things are coincidence. I know Jim Nill and Mark Janko work a lot at trying to set up the cap for the future. I think they are well aware that Thomas Harley is going to need a massive raise in 3 years, and the $7 million going to Lyubushkin and Dumba for the next 2 years, probably going in Thomas Harley's pockets in 3 years. I think that is one of the long-term things to come out of today.
I think their 7 is right on, because Sean Durzi with Utah signed a $6 million a year contract for 4 years. So
yeah.
I think when that contract happened, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Well, Harley's more than that then. So that kind of
Yep.
Okay. So now let's move on to the goaltending situation. And as mentioned, Scott Wedgwood wanted to stay here, wanted more years and or a little bit of a raise, and the signs with Nashville, and coming to Dallas is Casey DeSmith as a award-winning goaltender, my friend. Your thoughts? It was a 3-year contract, $1 million a year, so the Stars stay fixed as far as the backup goaltender for $1 million a year.
Yeah, one of the things to know about how the Stars approached the backup goalie situation was they came in with a hard line on, we want to spend $1 million on a backup goalie. That was the hard line AAV they wanted to go. Scott Wedgwood wanted more than that. And to Scott Wedgwood's credit, he went and got $1.5 million per year for 2 years in Nashville. But it was something where the Stars were very adamant in their own internal cap plans. The backup goalie was going to make $1 million. You bring in Casey DeSmith, who has played a good amount of games in his career, can be counted on for 30 to 35 games, started a couple playoff games this year before he himself got hurt. I mean, from the Smith signing to me, being at 3 years is maybe that's a bit long, but I think it gives the Stars really good cap certainty to have $1 million backup for each of the next 3 seasons. Next year, when Jake Ottinger has a big raise, well, Jake Ottinger will be doing RFA raise next year, and he's going to need a lot more money. So you're not worrying about the other. Like it just provides some certainty from a cap number, and I think some certainty with play because you can trust Casey Smith to 30 to 35 NHL games a year, and maybe 40 if you needed to because of injury. I think it's a fine move. It's not it's not splashy, it's not anything like that. And just to be like completely frank on things, who else were the Stars get like there's like I know some people on Twitter are like, "Oh, what about Matt Murray? Is Matt Murray like Matt Murray's never really had that it factor for me as an actual future NHL backup." So you could have gone with the younger guy, but you could have gone with that guy. You could have brought him back. They also didn't qualify Matt Murray, so we'll see where he goes still. To me, this is you have your young guy still growing, and he's the starter. It's good to have a veteran backup that can happily give you some cost certainty at that position. That's how I look at the DeSmith signing. If Scott Wedgwood was willing to take the $1 million per year, he would have been back.
Right.
But to Scott Wedgwood's credit, he wanted some more money, and he went and got it somewhere else. So to me, it's basically Wedgwood and DeSmith are very similar to me. And DeSmith is just has a little bit more games played experience in his career.
Yeah, I also wonder, Sean, 3 years at $1 million a year, that is a good deal for the Stars. I also wonder if it had to do with organizational depth as far as net minding.
You mean to go 3 years?
Well, I'm just saying, like, when you look at the Stars, yeah. And you look at like what's happening in Texas, what's happening in Idaho, what's happening in Germany.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not like the next coming is happening.
No, it's not going to happen for a while, right? Like, in theory, the Stars aren't going to need another. If things knock on wood here, in theory, the Stars aren't going to need to worry about another starting goalie for a decade.
Right.
So that's kind of the. And you don't have to worry about that right now.
Well, I think a very good signing that I was disappointed on Sunday, but happy today is a 1-year deal with Sam Steel at $1.2 million. Steel had career highs in games, shorthanded goals, shorthanded points. Which you should have just buddy, you should have just texted me and I would have told you this was going to happen. You were upset on Sunday. You should have just texted me and I would have told you that they were just waiting to they were just trying to avoid arbitration to get it done this way. But man, I like using you on the podcast and I didn't want to, overdo my welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, wow. But I think that's a really good signing by the Stars. I think it was a nice fit. I also like Sam Steele's versatility as far as if you do need a guy to move up, he could certainly do that. I thought it was a real nice fit in Dallas last year.
Yeah, I think that was a good one. I think I like the value back for him. You look at kind of where this team's going to go. You see probably an opening night fourth line with him and with Steel and Dodonov and Foxa possibly. Like, I think there's a good fit there. So
yeah, I think that's interesting because I agree with you, Dodonov on that fourth line, and I was just playing around, and it can change. But I was actually throwing this out to David the other day, and it's too early to do, Sean. But at the same time, I was looking at Robertson, Hintz, and Johnston on the first line, with the return of Duchene, run it back with Duchene, Sagan, Marchment. Then I had Bork, Stankoven because of their familiarity in the AHL with Jamie Benn, and then that fourth line of Foxa, Steel, and Dodonov.
That's exactly how I would line it up right now. You got to see how things like shake out, obviously, with Bork in the middle on that line with Ben and Stankoven. But that makes a ton of sense to me. You have, I think at this point, you're with Craig Smith signing off in Chicago and Ty Dellandrea going. I think there's a spot where you're gonna have to have one of your younger AHL guys take the next step. But you got a couple guys like that. You have Oscar Bach, Mate Blumel. You could do Emilio Pettersson. Sorry, Matthias Emilio Pettersson. I think you have your. I think you're 13. I think you're going to have one of those guys step up and prove it that they can be that 13th forward. Maybe gets into the game from time to time, but when you've spent the way the Stars have on some other things, this is how you have to operate as a franchise. So
we are a podcast of the people, Sean. So my question to you would be, what do you say to the Stars fan that thinks they took a step back?
Well, I mean, they did. Like I think it's fair to say they did. I mean, they were a better team with Chris Tanev.
Mm-hmm.
They were a better team with Chris Tanev. They were a better team with Ryan Suter on the third pairing. Like the defense didn't get better today. So you have to look at the defensive side of things and be like, okay, if Harley are your answers going to come from within? Is Harley going to take another step? Is Nils Lundquist going to figure it out? Because there's a couple of those question marks that the Stars could be a better team. They could be right back where they were. But they didn't get better today. Other teams in the league got better. Other teams also had more work to do to get better. I would also argue from a perspective when it comes to the Stars, there's also only so much they could have done to get better. I think, once again, we talked about the Lyubushkin signing, and I'm not a big fan of the Lyubushkin signing. So there's some things that they probably shouldn't have done that I'll disagree with. But it's still a team that top tier team in the Central Division. It's now going to be a fascinating Central. It's going to be an absolute meat grinder now. I mean, it's going to be, yeah. But still, the Stars are one of the teams other people are going to be scared of. At least the Stars, like you look at let's use Edmonton as an example, right? The team that they lost to and everything like that. And we hear the rumblings right now that Leon Draisaitl might want to be out of Edmonton next year. The Connor McDavid's a UFA in 2 years. The Stars are, foundationally speaking, have the structure and the foundation with their pieces. Now things are set up to, I can tell you confidently, I think they'll be good 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now. A lot of other teams don't have that right now. And that's what my response would kind of be more to the people if like the Stars got worse today. Yeah, they probably took a little step back, but with the way the team's set up, they're going to be a force in the Western Conference for 5 to 6 years right now, even if they did nothing. And that's not something other teams can claim right now in this league.
Okay, when you asked Neil that question, he said Bichel rather than Bixel. Which one are we going with?
It's Bixel.
Okay.
There's a ton of, like, Tyler Sagan's name, Gavin.
Sagan.
How do you think, how does it get pronounced in Canada all the time?
Sagan.
How does it,
Heiskanen was one?
Yes, Jim is not probably the best authority on how to pronounce last names because he doesn't say them on TV.
Okay.
So,
well, I say that just to make sure. And you have talked on this podcast about Bixel starting the year in Texas. Do you still feel that way after today?
Now that Lundquist has been re-signed, yes.
Okay.
I had a whole D Magazine column written up about an hour and a half ago that I had to hit Control A on because they re-signed Nils because they re-signed Nils. So like right now going into camp, I think Bixel is probably starting the season in Texas. Right now we're probably looking at something where like realistic, like I think in Jim Nils' mind, he's got three righties now, and I think he wants them all to be in the lineup. Now, whether Pete DeBoer agrees with him or not is going to be fascinating, but so someone is going to get a chance to play with Heiskanen off the top. So to call it what it, let's hypothetically speaking, let's say it's Dumba, right? I'm not sure. I don't like that. I don't love that pairing, but say we're going to go three lefty righty. Say you go Heiskanen, Dumba, um, Lindell, Lyubushkin, and Smith, Lundquist. I could see, uh, I could see that looking something like that. Now, I think the best decision from how it would work is I actually would now like to see Bixel start in Dallas. This is what I personally would do. And once again, I don't. It's why Nils Lundquist kind of resigning kind of messes with all this. Is I'd love to see Harley Heiskanen, Lindell Dumba, Bixel Lyubushkin. That's what I would like to see, and I would like to see Ryan Smith as that 7 that comes in and out and everything like that. Adding Nils Lundquist to this just all doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, and once again, like, I get why if you're the Stars and you're sitting on assets and everything like that, fine. I don't get it. Goes back to if I'm the player and his agent is actually Claude Lemieux, if you want to for people to know who he is. I don't get it. I don't get why Nils Lundquist decided to put himself back in this situation. So if Nils Lundquist and if the Stars were the only people willing to offer Nils Lundquist 1.25 million, and I believe that he had to have some sort of market because otherwise, why would they give him 1.25 million?
Right.
So like I don't get why Nils Lundquist decided to come back. So because he's back, Liam Bixel started in the AHL. I don't get it though.
Jim Nill in that press conference that you were asking the questions also highlighted Yuri Lettinen as far as them kind of, talking with him, picking his brain regarding their first round draft pick. What did you think of the pick by Dallas?
I thought it was fine. I mean, I didn't, it's our, I thought it's the player they had as best player available at the time. It was someone who I think will fit in well with how the Stars play. And honestly, with where the Stars were picking in that draft, most of the high intrigue, high upside guys were gone already. So it's a fine pick. We'll have much better answers 3 to 4 years from now. But it's not like some other, like, it's not like there's, when you're picking 28 or 29 or whatever it is, it's hard to really justify a major mistake at this point, right? Because we all don't know. These are 18-year-old kids. I personally would have liked EJ Emery right there.
Yeah, me too.
And now I did some reporting over at EP with my pal Cam Robinson, where we learned one of the reasons that Emery dropped was teams at the combine learned he had a medical condition. I don't know what the medical condition it actually is, but there was a medical condition that teams learned about that they looked at Emery as someone who, and we were told that it was not a medical condition that will impact his career, but it was one of those where teams, it led to some questions about whether you could use a high pick on him with that knowledge. So I don't know once again, don't know what it is at all. I just know that it was something the teams learned about at the combine, and multiple teams told Cam and I that's why, that's why that's why Emery dropped all the way to where he did, and the Rangers got a nice little find. So,
all right, development camp this week, Sean. Is there anyone that we should kind of keep our eye on as far as the Stars' young guns?
Well, I should look at the roster right now while we
development camp. Just to let people know, it's going to happen in Frisco this week. Ends on July 4th.
Let's see this development camp roster, I guess, real quick. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, development camp roster. Let's see.
One name that I want to throw out there, Gavin White.
Yeah. Why?
David really likes him.
Yeah, why? I just why? Okay, like
he just likes him, so I'm just asking.
Like Gavin White had the 4th round pick. He had 11 assists in 49 games by Texas. He was a healthy scratch for every single playoff game. Why? I'm serious here. Like I'm not trying to like I've seen other people talk about Gavin White and I'm very confused. Like Gavin White to me will never play an NHL game. If he does, people can come yell at me. That's fine. But why? I mean, I thought you brought it up now because maybe you guys share a first name. I'm not trying to. I don't understand. I've seen multiple Stars fans think Gavin White is the next coming, and I don't know where it's coming from. So please help me here, Gavin.
I mean, I'm just he brings him up multiple times, so I wanted to get your opinion. And you know what?
You got my opinion here. I mean, it's like I've got to. Okay, let's see.
Of all the things Sean is fired up most about today, I didn't think it was going to be a Gavin White discussion.
No, I'm so confused. Like, I get all of these people I get all these Stars fans who are like, oh, this guy does this and everything like that. I mean, was a healthy scratch in the playoffs. He averaged this season. Let's see, because I can pull this up rather quickly. So he had this season.
I'll give you my two. I'll give you my personal two. So I got this real quick. I got this. He averaged 17-15 time on ice this year for Texas. Amongst defenders, I believe that was. Hold on, let's see how they're going. But like, yeah, he's a fine AHL player. Yeah.
I don't see where this is. And like, it's funny because you brought it up and I've had multiple people bring up to me who are like Stars fans. They're like, oh, Gavin White's coming. And I did no idea where it was coming from because I talk to people in the organization all the time. No one else is saying this. Like, it's like, I mean, he was used less than Tristan he was used much less than like Petrovic. And there was guys like, I mean, the Stars traded Artem Grushnikov away. And like, I was like, I mean, to me, it's not, I mean, Michael Caro played a much larger role. So sorry.
All right, here. No, it's okay. Listen, I'm just asking, and you know what?
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. After this, I'll have Steven Reserve on and talk about some of these guys. But one guy I am interested in because he played with Stankoven and Juniors is Matthew Semenoff in the AHL last year with Texas, kind of a 4th line role. But I'm interested to see his development second year in the AHL. And I am interested in the German goaltender who will be here. And I'm interested, Sean, as far as where does he play next year and does he stand out? And I hope I get his name pronounced right. Arno Tiafanisi.
So I've said his name before.
Yep.
And I had a German respond to me who said, you said it so poorly, I had no idea who you were talking about. Oh, wow. So I have no idea how to pronounce this name.
Yeah.
Arno Tiafanisi. Like, it's now Arno. I know first name is Arno. Arno is going to play for Adler Mannheim again next year. He's got a contract still in Germany for next year. But he is one that I would be definitely interested to watch. He was an overager when he was drafted. He is he's an interesting one to me. I also like looking through when you kind of look through the stuff like there's, I mean, the Emil Hemming, the pick this year is always interesting. Arttu Harrai from Karpat in Finland is an interesting player to me. But you had a good one too with us. Like I think Semenoff is a good one too.
Good job, Gavin Spittle. Bad job, David Castillo. That is the lesson of the day. But this Stars development camp, is interesting for Stars fans, but you really like the Traverse City tournament where it's prospects against other prospects. that's where you first saw Miro Heiskanen as far as from a competition standpoint, and he really stood out. So that's your tournament that you really gauge things off of, correct?
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's no longer a tournament. This year, it's just going to be a 2-game set between Detroit and Dallas. Other teams have gone to their own thing. So it's no longer the greatest sample size, but it still is prospects against their peers, which I really like in an actual game setting. So.
Okay. For those Spits and Suds listeners, we will get into other NHL teams and their acquisitions in the future. We will also talk about how the draft was so good this past weekend at the Sphere and how and why it's going away after getting rave reviews. So these are the many things that we will talk about in the future, but we wanted to concentrate on the Stars because we thought it was important and go over every single move that they made on this Monday. My friend, I say it constantly, you are a beast. Thank you for your opinions. I really appreciate it. You can catch Sean at Sean Shapiro. The article on Shap Shots, which is his Substack, which you can subscribe to regarding the Chris Tanev tax implications, that was amazing. Congratulations on that. You can catch him at D Magazine, and hopefully you can get an article out before things change. But you can get it all at Sean Shapiro. Has everything listed, including the late game movie, including the book called We Win Here. Thank you so much, Sean, for jumping on today. What a crazy but interesting day.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. It was a fun one. So once again, this show's great. Thank you to everyone who's listening. We will definitely keep people in the loop throughout the summer. So it's going to be fun, but everyone, enjoy your holiday weekend and everything like that. And thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have some more programs this week, but for Sean Shapiro, I'm Gavin Spittle. Thank you for being with us on this NHL free agency on Monday, right here on Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.